I also do kind of like that we're not doing it on camera. I do feel like it makes it, I don't know, I get self-conscious about whatever weird face I'm making. And
I have now vowed never to do a Zoom call again.
I always just wind up like contemplating my own mortality.
Yeah.
I think a natural way certainly for a lot of guys is to be, it's a little bit like you're in a Mediterranean cafe. Maybe there's a friend next to you, but you actually make no eye contact whatsoever.
Yeah.
And you're basically you're commenting to each other on the world as it goes by. And that seems to me to be a civilized kind of conversation.
Yeah.
All right. No eye contact.
Yeah.
Not only we will not have cameras, no eye contact.
Welcome to Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media, where we explore the tectonic shifts in media that are changing how we see the world today. I'm Max Tawney, media editor at Semaphore, and with me, as always, here in an actual physical studio together is our editor-in-chief, Ben Smith. Hi, Ben.
Nice to be here in person.
It is. This week, we're sitting down with Nick Denton. Nick is, of course, the iconic founder of Gawker, the massively influential 2000s web blog. And recently, he reemerged after a nearly 10-year absence from public life following the Peter Thiel-funded lawsuit that forced Gawker to close. So we wanted to talk to him about why he returned to the internet, his kind of surprising views on the tech titans who are shaping our politics and culture, and why he's short Tesla and long China.
Yeah, I think this will be Nick's first podcast interview. And, although like a lot of journalists of my generation, I spent a lot of time thinking about and reading Nick Denton, this will be the longest I've ever spent with him, I believe.
Well, we'll dig into all of that and chat with Nick Denton right after the break. So, Ben, as we were kind of discussing who we wanted to have as a guest on the show this week, you sent me and our producer, Sheena, a few tweets from Nick Denton, the founder of Gawker, noting that you had been getting texts from various people in media, colleagues of ours, begging for us to bring him on the show because he basically has been gone from the kind of public sphere for the last 10 years since his site was brought down by this Peter Thiel kind of backed lawsuit. You have this long relationship with him and with Gawker. You wrote about him for your book. Can you kind of explain who Nick is and why so many people have been texting you trying to get him onto our show?
Yeah, I mean, Nick is an enormously consequential figure really in the history of media. It was a very ambitious, smart Financial Times reporter who was sent to San Francisco to cover the tech boom in the 90s, got the bug, and started a series of blogs. Gizmodo and Gawker were the sort of first ones that really brought a kind of authentic internet conversation to journalism. And they really blew up traditional New York media. Everybody's obsessed with them. They wrote things that nobody else would publish, and honestly, that nobody would publish now, like scurrilous rumors and whatever you happen to hear. And really reshaped a lot of the way media worked as people realized, oh, wow, you can just put things on the internet and move a lot faster and in a much more authentic way. Looking back, I think they were as much the precursors of Twitter as they were of kind of the web-based internet, turned into these powerful juggernauts that really, drove culture, that a lot of media copied, and that at some point, I think, like not really realizing their own power, we're publishing sex tapes. We're publishing things that were, I think, pretty hurtful to the targets and outrageous to a wide variety of people, including the jury, in a defamation case that Hulk Hogan brought, the former professional wrestler, over a sex tape that Gawker published. That lawsuit was financed by Peter Thiel, who says that he was upset that not only did Gawker write about his being gay, but that Nick Denton, our guest, made a sort of obnoxious comment about his sexuality. Nick is also gay. Be that as it may, this was a real moment of these tech moguls realizing, oh, we can take on the media, we can destroy media companies that we don't like for whatever reason, and was a very important moment in 2016 of the swing of the pendulum, kind of away from internet media and toward these powerful, wealthy individuals who I think are now these central figures in American life.
And of course, this lawsuit did work. Gawker went away. It's kind of tried to be revived at various points, largely unsuccessfully. And throughout that time, Nick has kind of, since the lawsuit, basically been largely absent from public life. But of course, over the last week, he started tweeting again. He's tweeted now hundreds of times over the last week, which is, insane. But I'm curious, what has he been saying in these tweets? Why are they interesting? Why were they interesting to you? And what stuck out to you about his new internet presence.
You know, we're all to some degree living in a media world that he shaped and then he just absolutely vanished from 10 years ago. And I think a lot of people have been wondering, you know, what is he thinking? How does he see the world now? And I think in his tweets, he's both, I think, very critical of Elon Musk and writes that he sees himself and sees what he thinks is going wrong with Musk in his own experience. And I think that's interesting.
Well, I think he's actually waiting for us. So why don't we bring in Nick Denton?
Thank you for coming in. And this is like particularly kind of fun and odd for me because I wrote a book about you in which you participated very, very generously, but we never met.
We did meet once. We arranged to meet for lunch.
But that was before the book.
It was before the book.
Yeah.
I assumed the idea was germinating, but...
But then once I started writing the book, you would only communicate with me
I
by
was
text
kind of
message.
like, you know what, there's been enough written on this. I think you did manage to take the right angle. I certainly look on it now. I'm not sure whether I liked the angle at the time, the traffic angle. But now that I look back on that time and also how it connects with where we are now, I do see that it was apposite.
But why didn't you like the angle?
I guess because I cared about the journalism, you know. So there was actually something about the story and the conversation around the story that got lost in a battle with Jonah Peretti, which was definitely at one side of my existence then, a big side of my existence then. But it wasn't everything about me.
Yeah. Though actually, I'm not sure I've ever told you this, but one of the real problems with the book, and to me, what I feel sort of denied it its rightful place on the New York Times bestseller list, was that one of the characters just drops out 2/3 of the way through and totally screws up the narrative, which is you. And I guess I was sort of delighted, slightly freaked out to see a couple weeks ago that you had popped back up on Twitter with lots of thoughts that had obviously been germinating a long time. I just counted this morning. You basically barely tweeted since you signed off in 2017 and then have tweeted 230 times across 2 accounts since mid-March. And what brought you back?
I mean, I had a likes feed, which was public until they made it private. And that was kind of an expression of my interests. So I wasn't entirely silent, but I was lurking. What brought me back? A story, really. It's the biggest, best ever business and financial story that I've ever seen in my life, in my career, from Eastern Europe through derivatives scandals, through to Silicon Valley technology. This one has it all.
Which story?
I mean, the story. Trump, Musk, Vance, the end of the American empire, the crumbling of dollar supremacy, like the story.
So you decided to kind of pop back on. Do you miss covering it as a journalist, or does, talking about it on Twitter kind of scratch that same itch?
Well, I mean, it just seems like all of this is on a spectrum, from this conversation that we're having right here to, what I read on the subway on the way up,
Sure.
and the tweets that are germinating in my head and whatever articles or essays may result. And I don't really see a line between any of that, nor between that and actually acting on your insight and trading on your insight, which is what I'm doing now.
You wrote that Musk did not take over Twitter. This was the one that sort of got me. Musk did not take over Twitter. It was Twitter that took him over. And you said that you sort of saw it and related because you kind of had the same experience. And I wasn't sure what you meant about the second part. Because I always thought you had a level of distance, actually.
I mean, I might have had personal distance, but I set up a page view system and then a system for maximizing uniques, so basically new visitors, inspired by Jonah Peretti. I'm going to put that one at least partly at his doorstep, because that was like a supercharging the system, looking always for new validation, for new shock, and I think that combined with the growth of Twitter pretty much drove Gawker writers into their great derangement of maybe 2012 to 15. It was something around that time period. Basically, between kind of the run-up to A.J. Dolerio's story on Hogan through to the story on the CFO of Condé Nast then, which then led to me to fire half the Gawker staff in one afternoon. So,
did you ever feel that you yourself got pulled into it, or was it more watching your writers get sort of, as you see, kind of radicalized in a way?
I think I always had some detachment look, I was complicit in that I needed the numbers. I needed the numbers partly for people like you, media critics who would be judging BuzzFeed and Huffington Post and Gawker and others according to their position in some league table. So let's be clear, absolutely everybody was part of this traffic system. So I was kind of into it to that extent. But the truth is that I was deeply ashamed of the Hogan video. I was deeply ashamed of the Hogan video, not the story, and I couldn't even face looking at it. And so I did have that kind of detachment in me that, part of me saw the logic behind the people who were trying to put Gawker.com out of business. Part of me sympathized with them.
And that being Peter Thiel. I mean, I guess Elon is part of that world, although not, he wasn't particularly involved. I have been surprised to see, I guess it seems like really ever since you've had a level of sort of sympathy and interest in the people who drove you out of business.
There's an interesting backstory. I'm not sure whether you picked up on this one. Since I left the Financial Times, the one time I was really a journalist was when I actually wrote Value Act myself.
Yeah.
In 2007.
Yeah.
I think it was for a large part of the year. And that was pretty much the fullest expression of myself as a journalist, doing kind of what I used to do at the FT, which was try to put myself in the middle as a node and act as a switchboard for information. And for that time, I had pretty much all of them passing through me, all of the Andreessens and the Musks with their multi-thousand-word essays or complaints. Like these people actually care very, very deeply about their public image.
Yeah.
And I guess now I feel like, let's put aside all that nastiness about the court case. I feel like that period of observation, and then also just observing my own sites go a bit crazy during the heyday of progressive boom in digital media. I feel like it's kind of given me quite a lot of insight into what's going on right now.
Have you kept in touch with, some of the subjects of your coverage since, or have you reconnected with, with any of those folks?
I mean, since 2016, not. I mean, obviously I was in touch with Thiel inadvertently during the court cases when it became evident that he was the one behind the court cases, that, when we were trying to actually settle with the person who could actually settle.
Did you ever have sort of a real conversation with him?
Yeah. What did you
make of him?
I mean, he's a very intelligent man. What can I say? Look, they are all you might as well start from this position, that they are all very smart.
Yeah. They're
probably all, in the elite of this society, which, for better or worse, has left them on top. They play the game in terms of technology, business, and media. They play it at a very high level. So respect for the players.
What have you thought about some of their complaints about the coverage of them that's been absorbed into the bloodstream of the New York Times? I think about one of the complaints by the All In guys, the podcasters and Zuckerberg and some of these folks is that they get covered very, very skeptically by the New York Times and the Journal, these places that used to cover them as geniuses and kind of laud them. And I think, one could maybe draw a line between that coverage and, some of the more skeptical coverage from the early digital media days, in part because some of the folks that are now at those big institutions actually started in the kind of early blogging days. So what have you thought about their critique of the mainstream coverage?
In retrospect, I see how amazingly balanced we were. That we were in equal parts enthusiastic and critical. Elon Musk was absolutely not demonized, nor was Peter Thiel, nor were any of these people. We did, and I did personally, look at them as inspirations, as leaders. If there were more of them, America would be better off. That was my feeling about pretty much all of them. And still, through the conflicts with them, I've felt that. Elon Musk, I didn't really turn against, I guess, financially, until very recently. We liked the Cybertruck. Darren's persuaded me that the Cybertruck was cool. It's a freaking teenage fantasy.
Yeah.
Somebody's sketched it out on a piece of paper, and it actually got made, which is
it's amazing.
Hats off to that.
Yeah.
I think what's been damaging for them is not the Cybertruck's been burned or whatever, but the pictures of the metal panels falling off because the glue isn't strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's those embarrassing videos of them not being able to get out of the snow and things like that. It definitely is a aesthetically interesting car that gets mainly accomplishing that. And that's what I feel like causes most of its problems, right?
This is a meme war now.
Yeah.
And this is why I feel like this is comfortable ground for us to be talking about.
Yeah.
And actually it has a direct relevance, direct relation to the stock price. So, this is a financial...
It's a meme stock. It's a meme card to some degree,
The dollar is a freaking meme security, like all of, like a lot of America is a meme. So let's analyze it as that.
Do you think that Elon and the sort of folks around him that sort of see the media and the media as broadly as you say it, the whole thing, clearly and accurately, or do you think they've lost their minds in terms of how they see us, how they see people talking about them?
I think they've fallen for audience capture. Just like Joe Rogan has in the podcast world, just like the Gawker writers did in the peak of lefty Twitter. Elon Musk is doubling down on the most right-wing elements in his audience. Whenever he feels insecure, he gives them some Nazi dog whistle. He'll throw in some story about, white babies on bayonets in a South African demonstration against, white farmers, or, so he's absolutely race baiting. And it looks to me like somebody who's over-serving 3% of their potential audience. That this is a country in which policy is being made by several hundred people max on X.
Yeah.
And they're all Rubio, Musk, Vance, Trump. They're all competing for the applause from these 500 nuts on X, and that's my media criticism of the society right now.
Don't you think that that's kind of like one of the challenges that every single media company today faces because of fragmentation, right? Like there are so many options for places to kind of get your information, or so many viewpoints that are kind of able to be expressed and kind of surfaced to you. That's actually quite difficult to go against your audience because, once you do, somebody else is going to come and snatch them right up. Like it strikes me that as far as media companies go, the only company that can really go against its audience and survive is like the New York Times. Everyone else, if we
TBD.
Pissed off our audience today, I think that would be quite damaging.
It's like we're stuck in some eternal MAGA online primary in which, no, they can't go and tack to the center, tack to the median voter in the way that administrations have always done throughout all time. They have to keep on throwing some meat to these 500 nuts on X, because that appears to be where the electorate is at, where their primary electorate really is at. But there is a median voter out there, and the median voter will be heard from. And there is a stock market out there, and the stock market is being heard from right now.
Well, I think we need to take a short break, so why don't we do that, and we'll be right back with Nick Denton.
This week on our branded segment from Think with Google, I spoke with Google's VP of Marketing, Josh Spanier, about why YouTube matters for marketers. One of the big stories we've been talking about on the podcast, I think one of the surprises for some of our readers last year was the success of YouTube, the extent to which it's continued to just play this absolutely central role. Jessica Lesson called it a juggernaut. What do you put its success down to?
$70 billion. $70 billion. That is the amount of money that YouTube in the last 3 years has paid out to creators, to people who have posted videos online on YouTube. YouTube has paid $70 billion. And it kind of speaks to, look, follow the money. This is an incredibly vibrant, rich platform for people to make a living. There's 3 million content creators on YouTube who are part of our monetization program. About 500,000 of those 3 million have had a channel for 10 years or more on YouTube. Mr. Beast, Lily Singh, Lisa Koshy, these are household names now, and they are the new media entrepreneurs off the back of their brilliant content, but powered by the advertising and the revenue share that Google gives. That $70 billion is a big deal, and actually has created a whole digital and financial ecosystem which is driving the industry. On top of that, obviously YouTube has evolved as a company and actually added more features and benefits. So as we've spoken about before, on TVs in the living room, there's over 1 billion hours of watch time of YouTube every day globally. YouTube Shorts, our short form video product, has 2 billion people watching it every month. 70 billion videos a day are being watched. This sort of scale, this sort of audience is incredibly attractive to advertisers. It's incredibly powerful for creators because they can find their people. They can find the people who will love their content, wherever it is. And then we keep on expanding it. So podcasts, 400 million hours of podcast listenership or viewership now on YouTube every day. It's a remarkable scale which allows a win in every direction. Creators get paid, advertisers find audiences, consumers find entertainment or fascinating content.
Just huge numbers. What's the lesson for a marketer out of that?
There's multiple lessons. One of them is that if you get good at YouTube, across YouTube's breadth of offerings, you can do the targeting, the analytics, the measurement, the performance at great pricing because of the scale. You can actually solve nearly all of your video requirements without having to then turn to a second and third and fourth platform. Of course you can do that, but get great at YouTube and you're set up for every part of the video funnel.
Where can people find out more?
You can head on over to Think with Google and just search YouTube and getting the best out of YouTube on thinkwithgoogle.com.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh. So I want to ask you about this media moment because it reminds me a little of the moment when you really exploded into the sort of New York world. And I was a kid kind of looking at it from the outside because I'm a couple years younger than you. But in the early aughts, when it really felt like very wide open, there was tons of space, tons of new stuff being born, old things collapsing. I mean, does this moment remind you of that one at all?
I mean, there's a continuing collapse. I mean, I don't really want to talk about the liberal Democratic Party aligned media because I think that's kind of like a sideshow at this point. Like really the divisions that matter are within the Trump coalition and within the online influential parts
what do you
of Trump
consume?
Coalition.
What Trump media do you find most interesting?
I mean, I follow individual accounts. So Joe Lonsdale is interesting because he's cross-conflicted with partly Jewish background. And so he's an indication of who in the Thielist camp may be feeling a little bit queasy. Curtis Yarvin, Thiel's philosopher, kind of court philosopher, recently reappeared on Twitter. So that's fascinating. Richard Hanania, I always find interesting as a former scientific racist who has now seems to be more or less an IQ elitist and dismissive of MAGA from that point of view. I find almost no left-leaning voices, maybe apart from the anti-monopoly types like Ståle. But apart from that, I don't really care about the abundance debate within the Democratic Party. I don't think any of that's relevant.
But to return to Ben's question, because I think what Ben's getting at is the idea that, like, there was a reset post-Facebook with the end of, like, BuzzFeed News, the end of Vice, like these kind of big kind of giants. And now it seems like it's anyone's game. It's smaller. It's uncertain. You talk to, people who are in charge of media companies or even individuals, some of the platforms. Nobody really seems to know what's going on. People have ideas and theories about where things are going, but we're curious.
I gave you my names. I'd add Balaji Srinivasan.
But you're interested in individuals, not in organizations. Or
the signal comes from individuals, and from certain individuals, ones that are actually kind of most close to the edge of their coalitions and would be most likely to flip. Yeah. So if you're trying to work out kind of the power dynamics, at what point does Musk get kicked out? At what point does Trump separate himself from Musk's declining numbers, which they are afraid even to poll? Those kind of questions, which are actually interesting and market-moving questions, are the ones that you can only really analyze by looking at the dynamics between these individuals.
Given that this is a media show, we have to kind of keep bringing it back here, which is I'm very curious. Do people still tap you up for advice?
Yes, occasionally they do, and usually I say I've really got nothing to say. I don't really think about traditional media businesses. I think there's some interesting opportunities in an AI world because I think journalists or people who can ask questions and shape narratives can work with an AI very, very well if they choose to do so. I've found it delightfully empowering.
Yeah, me too. What do you do? Like, do you vibe code? Do you?
I play games with. I give it a set of facts and then I ask it to re-engineer my arguments. I starve it of information and then drip feed it.
You mentioned in an interview that you're working on a private AI company. that sounds like it's trying to make predictions. Can you tell us more? Like, how does it work? What's it called?
It's called Futura Kiadó, which means future publishing in Hungarian. And we're exploring near future timelines. So a simple one, something which is the basis of one of the trades that we have right now, BYD versus Tesla. So, let's just do a simple Financial Times style. Okay, where are Tesla sales going to be in 2030 and where are BYD sales going to be in 2030? Let's take current trajectories. Let's factor in some extra factors. Oh, Musk just said something that might compromise his sales in Europe. Let's adjust the timeline for that particular factor. So let's drop in new facts as they come, or even starve the model at the very beginning and then drop the facts in and train it up to the reality and then use the narratives and I guess how plausible they sound to decide. It's kind of financial journalism for the purpose that I think it kind of always was designed, which is to help people make decisions about their money, and which a lot of financial newspapers, I think, have forgotten.
Are you long or short Tesla?
Short. I think what's happening right now is maybe the grandest displacement activity the world has ever seen. That you have a great engineer, salesman, businessman in Elon Musk, and he has finally met a challenge that he cannot handle, a competitor that he cannot defeat. And I'm talking about China Inc., not just BYD, but BYD and Xiaomi and Unitree and NIO and a whole host of other companies that you haven't even heard of yet. And he's basically single-handedly took them on, and I think has recognized some point in the last 2 years that he cannot win with things as they are now. So I think his grand effort to reform the US government is focusing on the easier task rather than the one that his CEO job would entail.
You're obviously preoccupied with the Chinese tech economy. Where does your preoccupation with these Chinese tech companies come from? What kind of caught your attention?
I think I've been interested in the Chinese sphere probably since I was in Singapore working on the Barings book back in 1995. And then my TikTok is full of, it's basically Singapore government official speech I've been propagandized.
By Lee Kuan Yew, old Lee Kuan Yew clips. I get a lot of those too.
Oh, you
Very
do?
strange, yeah.
Well, that's some worrying authoritarian tendencies there revealed, dangerously technocratic.
Right. Some people are getting sort of softcore porn and we're getting Lee Kuan Yew speeches.
But they just have a higher caliber of official. I mean, I'm sorry, but they pay them well enough, and you feel like you've just gone up 20 points of IQ when you're listening to them. So when pandemic came down, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to Cuomo. I was listening to Lee Kuan Yew's son.
You're fascinated by Musk. We're all interested in Elon, obviously. And I feel like Elon now has kind of a 2017 Trump parallel in terms of people's interests. Like, I feel like when we write stories about Elon, when we talk about Elon, everything just kind of goes nuts in a way that content about Trump kind of used to do quite well. Have you ever met him? Have you ever interacted with him at all?
No, just email.
What was he like over email? Was he similar to
whiny CEO who was complaining about the coverage and was explaining what had really happened, which I was perfectly happy to. I'm sure we posted it all up or whatever.
Do you remember what annoyed him most?
No. I know what I think annoyed Thiel the most, which was not the latest story about the most powerful investor in Silicon Valley being gay and the crime of noticing a fact that everybody knew in Silicon Valley. Now, the story that he really didn't like was the story of the origins, the PayPal origins and Musk being pushed out of PayPal. Because one thing that those guys like their copybook storylines, like they want every single move to have been thought out, genius from beginning to it. They can't abide any kind of mess in the storyline. Yeah. And I'm trying to say to them, it's fine, it's fine, guys. You're super successful. You are brilliant. You are absolutely brilliant. Just don't mind this. It gives you extra personality and depth. But somehow they've never ever been persuaded of that.
No, it's interesting. It strikes me that one of the things that Trump and Musk and a lot of these guys have the most in common is their shared sensitivity regarding, media coverage and the inability to talk them out of, the idea that one story that's kind of negative or whatever is it's not the end of the world. And in fact, being the richest person in the world should be quite a salve for that.
And all those Tesla rave reviews, and
right?
We love your products,
right?
Like you are bringing the electric power and modernizing this entire economy. So, how much more do you need?
Yeah,
we're not allowed to joke about you.
Let's talk about Hungary a little bit, because I think in some ways, if I was the government of Hungary, I would be pretty psyched that this quite prominent entrepreneur of Hungarian descent, but who grew up in London, is moving back. Are they rolling out the red carpet for you? Have you gotten a call from Orban welcoming you?
I'm wondering how many. I know there's a lot of people looking for their passports. Polish passports, Austrian passports, German passports. Especially European Jews who came here maybe after the Second World War.
We should say you are Jewish.
Yeah, on my mother's side.
I'll just mention it for listeners.
I'm Hungarian Jewish.
Yeah.
So I can, it's a trickle, but I'm often early to these things.
Yeah.
I can see some kind of aliyah, some homecoming for European Jews. Come back. Think of Como. Think of the Alps. Think of the beauty. Think of the more relaxed pace of life. The sanity.
You have to try that timeline out on your media.
I have. Yeah. It does very well. It's very robust.
So as part of that, obviously, you're selling your iconic loft space here. Saying goodbye to that, do you have any sort of nostalgia or?
I didn't, but then I came across some pictures from 2005. I think it was September 2005. It was Arianna Huffington's launch party, and I was hosting it. And just looking around at the pictures, so it was kind of everybody was there from new and old media. I think Michael Stipe was there for God knows how. And everybody looks happy, optimistic. It's 2000. I guess I'm retrofitting those pictures too, because it's 2005. So capital hasn't really come in yet, hasn't poisoned the sector. I look at this sector as 2013, Andreessen Horowitz dumping however many 100 million they did.
50 million into BuzzFeed, I believe.
But then wasn't there more?
Yeah, and there was other investments.
And then others followed them, and that's basically started it started a stampede into a sector that really was too small and fragile to handle that kind of capital. And I was very clear in my head that I needed to get out.
And you never raised money, or you basically didn't. You resisted that, even as we were, and I was at BuzzFeed at the time, just outspending you. Basically,
I remember
you complaining about it.
I was quite happy just going to keep it going the way it had been going,
and running a profitable business, which then went totally out of fashion. Yeah.
Arguably, I should have sold right there as soon as Andreessen put the money in.
Yeah.
I knew I had to, but it was very hard with the lawsuits that Thiel was firing at us, and the union drive from within the company.
Did you ever say no to a serious offer?
I would say no. There was a indirect Murdoch offer.
Huh.
I thought to myself, how the hell am I ever going to get the writers to agree to this one? I was laughing to myself because
who did it come through? How did it come in?
I probably shouldn't say.
Oh, it's been a long time. Yeah. It's very discreet. You've developed a lot of discretion in your old age.
No, I'm very indiscreet about the facts, but I'm usually discreet about the source of the facts.
Yeah, fair.
So, the reason we wanted to have you on was because, you kind of reemerged. Can we expect more from you? Is this a limited?
I don't know. It kind of depends what they do, because I didn't start writing because of any plan. It really just started coming out. I didn't like Denmark being insulted. I have a very soft spot for Denmark. They saved all their Jews. They've run a budget surplus. They're prosperous. They've dealt largely with the political question of migration. They've defanged it. You can't say that the Danes are in the vanguard of civilizational suicide or anything like that. So when you come for the Danes, I get worked up. And I'm not rational anymore. So my patriotism is excited. So if there's more of that, which I expect, I guess I'll be writing more too.
All right. Well, I sort of, we kind of do need some combative European voices. I kind of like that role for you.
I think Donald Tusk is actually that voice.
Yeah, I know he's your guy.
He has that great line. It's like, how the hell? I'm adding a bit here. How the hell 500 million Europeans begging 300 million Americans, I would add indebted Americans, for help dealing with 100 million Russians who can't even handle 40 million Ukrainians. So that's my motto at the moment.
Absolutely. Right. Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. This was fun. So, Max, I've spent much of my adult life thinking in some way or other about Nick Denton. So that was totally fascinating for me.
Yeah.
What struck you?
I mean, the most obvious thing that struck me is the fact that he seems to have scratched his media itch, and there's pretty much nothing in the field of journalism that seems to interest him anymore, or the media business. And that maybe people took the wrong thing away from him for a long time, in the sense that I think he clearly was always interested in the stories more than he was interested in the business side of it. And maybe he was a media business person as a consequence of being interested in these bigger stories. What did you think?
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with you. I think that's actually what's great about media. It's funny. I was on Jessica Lesson's podcast yesterday with Britt Morin, and they were asking, how do you think that incredible Jeffrey Goldberg story?
Yeah.
And Britt, who's an entrepreneur, was asking, so what do you do when you get a story like that? You call your marketing team, and it's like, no. You're just what an amazing story.
Right.
And oh my God, did you see what
call
J.D.
your lawyer.
Vance?
That's it.
Yeah. But also you mostly say oh my God, did you see what J.D. Vance said? You think of
right.
it. And I do think actually great media entrepreneurs are usually obsessed with the content. Probably the way great ice cream entrepreneurs are obsessed with the ice cream.
Yeah, of course.
But I also think, I do think when historians look back at the last 20, or let's say the last 10 years, and they're trying to understand what happened in the world, they're going to be looking at Twitter. They're not going to be looking at the New York Times. I think Nick is basically right. And this was his insight, in 2000, 2001, 2002, that oh no, these conversations that are happening on the internet, those are the real ones. The ones that are happening in print, these newspapers and magazines are getting churned out and shipped around, that's something else. But the most important, most authentic conversations that are happening in the whole world are between Elon Musk and crazy anons. That's the real media.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of refreshing just to hear him say it.
What did you make of his feeling that the only interesting media entities these days are the conservative, intellectual, backbone philosophizer kind of class, the folks who are in the ears of Thiel and of Elon, but also just kind of posting online for the rest of us as well?
I think that people don't take them seriously enough. I think people like Balaji are really interesting, but Balaji Srinivasan, are really interesting. They're shaping the kind of intellectual environment around both this administration and I think around what Democrats are going to wind up reacting to.
Yeah.
They are also, there is a big argument going on about China right now in that space around Trump that Nick is clearly very, very engaged in. And I think that's a real TikTok phenomenon. We haven't really talked about that, but he's obviously spending a lot of time on TikTok watching speeches by Singapore's authoritarian founder and videos of how awesome Chinese cars are.
Yeah.
And and again, TikTok obviously optimizes for your own interests and reflects yourself back to you. So sort of putting all that aside, it is really, at least for me, an incredible channel for Chinese propaganda. And I know the Trump administration's about to save it for all sorts of, I think, reasonable free speech, et cetera, reasons. But you do have a lot of Americans getting videos about how futuristic Chinese cities are, how much better and cheaper Chinese cars are. I don't know. I think Nick's clearly consuming a lot of that content, and it's very persuasive.
Yeah. How much of all of this do you think is just a strategy for Nick to re-raise his own profile and the lore around his apartment as he tries to sell it here in New York? And do you think that it has been an effective real estate selling strategy?
One of the great truths of media is that half the time it always just comes back to some New York real estate deal. and Nick is in town. When he got up, he was telling us about how how our friend Lachlan Cartwright was trying to get him to give exclusives to his site, his new
media newsletter
called Breaker. And Nick was like, "What are you talking about? I'm trying to sell an apartment here. I'm going to put it in New York Magazine and Vanity Fair."
Right.
But I actually think that, like a lot of people, he's at least as much impulsive as he is strategic, and he's obviously interested in reclaiming this space. And honestly, I do think what I said at the end, that there is space for sort of fighting for sort of European voices that have the level of kind of combativeness and understanding of the English language internet, which again is still, for what America may have lost a lot of ground in a lot of places, but it just dominates posting still. And I do think there's
we're still
space.
Great posters. That's
yeah,
great.
and I think there is Nick's an extremely gifted poster, and I think that there's space for Europeans who can really mix it up with their noisy American cousins.
Well, I think that we should leave it there. That is it for us this week. Thank you for listening to Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media. Our show is produced by Sheena Ozaki, with special thanks to Max Toomey, Britta Galanis, Chad Lewis, Rachel Oppenheim, Anna Pizzino, Garrett Wiley, Jules Zern, and Tori Kaur. Our engineer is Rick Kwan, and our theme music is by Billy Libby. And special thanks this week to CDM Studios and Kathleen Conti. We're here, and it's actually quite lovely. We get to do this in person. Our public editor is Corey Sika, the Gawker alum, who can tell us all the things that the difficult questions we should have asked Nick.
Yeah, maybe he'll pick this up in his excellent New York Magazine newsletter. And if you like Mixed Signals, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and feel free to review us.
And if you still want more, you can always sign up for Semaphore's media newsletter, out every Sunday night.